Hi, my name's Sean Lonnie. People call me Shawnee Lonnie. Today I want to talk to you about a definition of peace and a definition of patience that people don't think about most of the time. The word peace is used two different ways in the Bible. One definition refers to peace within you. The other definition is peace with others. An example of this first definition of peace is in Philippians 4, where Paul writes to tell us not to worry, but to pray, and then God's peace will guard our hearts. We can see the Bible use the second definition of peace in Colossians 3, where Paul is telling the believers to make allowance for one another's faults. And then he goes on to say, let the peace that comes from God rule in your hearts. It seems clear that God's vision for this kind of peace is the perfect unity that Jesus prayed for in John 17. He said that our love for one another will prove to the world that we are his disciples. The word patience is also used two different ways. One definition has to do with the ability to wait. The other definition has to do with the ability to love people through their faults. This means to be genuinely kind or warm-hearted to someone who's being offensive, slow, selfish, or stupid. It's easy to read verses about waiting patience and think about God's promises for our own life. Maybe a future wife or husband or job. But most of the time, these verses are talking about waiting on or looking towards heaven. For example, here in Hebrews 10 verses 36 and 37, it says, "Patient endurance is what you need now, so that you will continue to do God's will. Then you will receive all that he has promised." And then it goes on to say that for in just a little while, the coming one will come and not delay. Also in Colossians 3, we see Paul use patience to talk about loving people through their faults. He says to clothe yourself in patience and to make allowance for one another's faults. I have to point out that the Bible paints patience as a responsibility for all believers, and not just a talent for a few believers, which means that every believer is expected to be patient, and we don't just hand over difficult people to our more patient friends. We all have a responsibility to show patience to others in the same way that God has shown patience to us through our sin, selfishness, and stupidity. You might notice that the definitions of peace and patience that you hear more often have more to do with our personal happiness. But the definitions of these words that have to do with loving others, you don't hear as much. And that's the natural way for us to think. It's more natural for us to think about ourselves. If we interpret Colossians 3 to mean to let inner peace rule our lives, for example, we might interpret this verse to cut out people that make us uncomfortable, when actually this verse might be telling us to draw closer to those people. Or we may interpret the verse to mean that we should make choices that are centered around making us comfortable, when really the verse is telling us to put other believers first in our choices. If we interpret verses about patience to always be about our future promises here on this earth, then we'll probably always be thinking about our future in this world. Our thought life, or what we think about all the time, is very important. From what I read in the Bible, we should almost always be thinking about heaven, God's goodness, thankfulness, the Bible, and how we can outdo one another in honoring each other. So I encourage you, next time you see one of these words in the Bible, remember all of these definitions and read before and after whatever the verse is to see what it's referring to. Reading the Bible this way can change how you interpret it, and that can change the way you live your life as you try to submit your life to God. Because in the end, we're trying to be like Jesus and not just chasing after our own happiness. Thank you for watching. This will hopefully be the first of a series that'll last for a long time. Let me know what you learned in the comments below, and please like and subscribe.